G'day everybody, today I'm going to show you a complete build and paint of a Shoretrooper. It started off as a garden statue that I got from Bunnings, and I saw a YouTube video a couple of years ago by Chris Cosplay there where he painted one, and I decided on doing one. When I was looking for the images, I found the Shoretrooper squad leader. His basic difference is he's got those extra paddy things on the bottom of him, and he doesn't have the pannier on the front. I also thought that the the pose that he was in was not squad leadery enough. I was thinking arms by his side with his gun wouldn't be what a squad leader was doing. I thought they'd be more likely to be pointing it off somewhere, and so I decided to cut the arms off, turn him into a Venus de Milo, and reposition. You know, if you're going for it, you may as well go the whole hog. So I sliced through his arms, and then I also chopped his finger off. So I chopped his right arm off at the just above his elbow, and his left arm off at the shoulder, so that I could position it up. I also chopped the finger off and turned it over so that it was coming out straight rather than pretending to hold a gun. And then I drilled a hole in the center of the arm, and I drilled a hole in the center of the forearm on his right arm, and I got a bit of coat hanger and chopped it off, and then bent it and got the arm on the right, sort of a right angle coming out straight. Not knowing still what the pose should be, there's a little bit of, as you all know, when you need to do these things, a little bit of cosplaying. Set the pose, how would you have your arm? Close to your body, out from your body, all of that sort of thing. So I just went with the pretty much the direction that it had been, just at a right angle now. So I glued that in place. The back of that then is the wire sticking out, and then I sawed off found another bit of a package that was on the front that's a shorter thing on the squad leader. In order to get the arm pointing, I needed to do the same thing with the coat hangery bit, but because he was hollow, I didn't want to be filling him completely with the modelling compound that I was going to use, so I stuffed a whole lot of paper in, bent another frame, as you saw at the beginning of just then. I got a Dremel and took out a little bit of the shoulder pad so that I could set it better onto the body. This is a thing called Agnew's water putty. There's another one on the market called Earl's water putty. They're both the same. You get the putty and mix it, I think it's 3 parts to 1 with water, and it makes a paste that sets really hard. You can drill it, you can saw it, you can do all sorts of things. So I plugged that in until it was in, pushed the coat hanger wire into the hole, and left it to set before I will bend it. I did a little bit around the finger to fill in the gap that was there, and I put some on the elbow where if you put it in and let it go off a little bit, not for too long, you can start to mould it. So then I drilled a hole in the arm, bent the coat hanger coming out of the left shoulder, and cut it to length, and between super gluing and bending the wire, got to have the arm pointing out the way that I want it. Then mixed up some more putty and sculpted it, made the folds of his clothing the way that I thought that they would go once he'd lifted his arm up. So that's just using a cotton bud and a couple of sculpting tools. With the water putty, if you use some water on it as you're doing it, it's easy enough to sculpt it and make it smoother. I came back and used a file and some blades to tidy up the edges and put the detail in properly, make it as smooth as I wanted it to be. So that's just, here's some still shots of the way that turned out. So there's the folds that just run into the folds from the original statue, and really chuffed with that. It came out really well, and I think the water putty was definitely the way to go for this one rather than green stuff. Because I was going to need a lot of green stuff, I didn't want to be doing tons of it. Plus, I thought the putty was the better thing to fill the top half of his chest cavity with. I had to order some more green stuff, so in the meantime I made out a paper plan for the skirting, and then the green stuff turned up a couple of days later, and so I got the amount that I thought it was going to be, rolled it out. The bit of chucks that I'm using there is just to give it a little bit of a fabric pattern, and it put it in, but when I ended up pushing it around on the model and sticking it to, it wasn't super, it looks more like a bit of leather than a piece of fabric, but it's good. Now I wanted a bit of a dynamic. I didn't just want it hanging down there. I wanted it to sort of feel like he was down by the ocean where there might be a bit of a breeze. He's walking along the shoreline. So because green stuff takes a while to set in place, I just made some cardboard rings and sticky taped them together and then just plonked them onto the model and stuck them in place and left them there to hold the first part of his the fabric skirt, I suppose it is, so that it could set in place. I put some extra blobs on just to make the folds up the top where he has bits of the original statue, and I ran it down the line of the original bags that were on the front of his uniform, so that the bit that you can see around the side of it forms into the skirty bit. Once that was dry, I did the other side. Because I wanted to have it shape, I didn't want to try and do two on the one day. So when the first one was dry, I turned the piece of paper over and duplicated for the second one. And because the breeze is blowing, this one blows around his leg rather than away from his leg, just to keep the idea of what it's doing. And I'm really happy with the way that it turned out in terms of the way that it looks. There was a few, so I had a combination of old green stuff and new green stuff, so there was a couple of little lumps in there that I didn't realise. So this is just filing off the bumpy bits and trying to get it a little bit smoother looking. I filed it, I did a little bit of sanding and tidied it up, and when the paint went on it's fine. Still looks quite leathery, but I'm still chuffed with it. That was the whole of the construction for this guy. So from here on in, it's just painting. I went outside and just used a rattle can basic black, flat black, onto the surface, and then just grabbed some colours that I had round home and mixed up a cream till I liked the look of the cream. This product, it was definitely not meant to go through an airbrush, and I struggled a bit with getting the brush to even thinning it down. At one stage I turned the pressure up and it still wouldn't spray properly, so it was a little bit fiddly. In the end, really flat finish and a good colour for me, so I'm okay with it, but I wouldn't use that product through an airbrush again. And I did want to airbrush the armour because I didn't want to have the brush lines in it. I got a brown, made a dark brown up out of a bit of black and a bit of red and a little bit of yellow, and got the brown that I thought was right for his uniform. The coverage was absolutely lousy, so I decided before I did his pants and the skirt part to use another paint that I have that's just an outside paint for my house that's a brownie colour, and put a base coat down. So I went over the whole lot of all of his fabric parts, all of his bendable uniform and the skirty bit with the darker brown. That's what I'm doing now. So I haven't included any of the whole paintings. Because it's just me doing the same thing, every now and again you'll see it just transitions into a bit more of it done. That's just to save you. The paint job, I think, was about 6 or 7 hours just doing all the fiddly things. So even sped up, it was a little bit tedious to look through. So I've cut it down, but I hope it gives you the idea of what I'm doing anyway. So that was the brown over the better covering brown over the lot, and then I used the original brown again on the fabric parts of him, on his legs and the joins around his shoulders and neck and all of that. This is definitely the better brown colour for the reference photos. Then once I'd done that, I actually added some more red and some more black to it to make a much darker thing for his skirt, because the images from the Hot Toys photos, reference photos, show that the skirt's sort of slightly darker material than or it appears to be darker material than the pants and these undergarments are. So it was a fair bit of brown painting back and forth, and this is just doing the skirty bit. It's not a massive contrasting colour. When it dries, it is dark enough different that you can tell that it's not the same, but even on the reference photos, it's just a bit different. So yeah, I hope you're sticking with it. If not, fast forward to the end, because the reveal is on the same video. We're doing the same video thing today, a full one. That's why it's 28 minutes long instead of 15 minutes long. I thought rather than just have half of it being a build and half of it being the paint job. I really enjoyed Chris Cosplay's painting video, and like I said, it was an inspiration to have a go myself when I found these things at Bunnings. And I would, if you've got one or you feel like doing it, yeah, it's a pretty spunky little model. So there it is. I put the black on, so I outlined all of the things that needed to be black. Now in the process there was a couple of mistakes. I got some black where I didn't want it. So I also have got some brown where I didn't want it on the cream. So there is going to be some touch-ups with the cream. What I have found though is you're better off to do all of your mistakes, to do everything, make all the mistakes that you make when you're doing it, and just touch it up once. If you keep going back and fixing it every time you apply a new colour and put it in the wrong spot, you just get frustrated. So multiple coats of the browns just to bring out the detail, the full colour of it all. And in amongst the process, my son came in and he was looking at the skirt, and he said that he thought that at the end of it, it needed a little bit of a dry brush. So I got a lighter brown that was just a standard Games Workshop colour. Been raining a lot here, so on the day I decided that a hairdryer is a good way to just accelerate it so I could keep going. Now I'm painting the white bit and the red bit on his armour, and the red bit near the little red insignia that's up near the top of his helmet. The blue will follow, and I did do a dry brush, which I think you should see on his skirt bit, just to highlight the edges and to put a little bit of variation in the overall colour. At this point in time I started to get pretty tickled with the way it was coming out. I was happy with what it was doing. The chest armour, the line across his chest is quite straight, and although I painted around the lines that were impression lines on his arms, I did want it to be really straight on the chest, so I did mask it up with safe release masking tape. This is just one that's low tack, so you can put it over fresh paint when it's dry and it doesn't rip it off generally, and it also doesn't bleed underneath it. I really like it. It's a brand that 3M makes their Scotch low tack long life tape, and it came away really well, left a really good line. So he was pretty much, for all intents and purposes, done, except for a little bit of dry brushing of silver on his gun. Once I did do the dry brushing of the silver, I needed to just touch a little bit more of the black up, so the gun got a little bit of treatment. But here he is fairly painted out. There's the touching up of all of the creamy bits in one go right at the end, and therefore I'm not frustrated every time there was an oops. I just fixed them all when they were done. There's going to be oopses, but if you keep stopping and starting, you just start making more mistakes and you get cranky, and I find that you make more mistakes. So touching up all of the creamy bits. After I did that off camera, I got a spray can of hairspray and just did that's the hairspray in the background. It's just a cheap one that I got at Aldi when I was shopping, and I gave everything a coat so that when I start doing the weathering, if I've got with the washers and making the runs and the smudge and stuff, it gives you a little bit longer to play with it, and also the flatness of the cream paint, it meant that it was actually going to run on it and not just shake across it weird. So as you can see, he's got a little bit more of a sheen to him because of the hairspray. If you are doing, the hairspray was cheap, I just used the cheapy hairspray and it does a really effective job, but it has more of a sheen. So if you want it to be matte, I would advise you to go out and get a can of the matte spray. Army Painter makes ones, I think Citadel make one. We don't have a Citadel shop local, so I just went with the hairspray because it's very cheap, but it does put a little bit of a gloss on things. Some of that got mitigated when I was doing the weathering, because the wash tones it back a little bit, and I noticed when I was looking at the photographs that his armour actually in the photos has a lot of black on it as well. It's good. It's not just the brown dirt, it's also black. So I used just the straight flat black that I have, and gave it a light brush over on the fabric and things, and that took some of the sheen out of it all. This is the Army Painter's Rust colour. It's an oil cleanup one, so again, over the top of the spray you get a real lot of time to work with it, and I just went in and detailed on the joins and kept looking at the reference photos. Now I zoomed in on the process so that you could see a little bit more of what was happening, but as a result I didn't realise when I got in the way, so there's some of the shots when it's close like this really do jump, because in some places it was just my arm or my head, and so I, again, in the interest of not boring you to sobs, I have jumped and deleted some of the things where you don't see anything happening. This was just a process of putting it on, wiping it off, using a little bit of thinners and shifting it around on the model till I was happy with the amount of dirt. I did more dirt on his legs than on the top part of his body, because in the reference photos his legs had been more in amongst the muck than the top half of him had been. So he, prior to this, was a brand new squad leader that had only just arrived on planet, and this is a couple of weeks later when he just isn't bothering with his armour anymore, and it's dirty and weathered, and he's just out on patrol doing his thing. Yeah, so I could whistle a little bit for you, but we'll thankfully move to putting the dirt on. So this is just a matte black, and I very lightly dry brushed it. So little dab, just getting what I could get out of the lid rather than dipping it into the tin, brushing it out on a bit of paper till there was next to nothing on there, and then getting it onto his armour. I also did a little bit of silver the same way. This is Necron Compound, which is the Citadel one for doing dry brushing silver, and I just highlighted the tops of his panniers in particular, his bat belt. Around the gun, I was a little bit heavy on his gun, so I did go back and brush a bit more black over the top of it, and around his armour where it looked like it had weathered a bit. So the gun was a little bit too silvery and I needed it to be a little bit more gunmetal, so I just got the black and did another dry brush on it so there's a little bit less silver. This is doing the highlight edges as my son suggested, and a little bit of brushing on the flat parts of his skirt. I just did a little bit of a crosshatch on the flat parts, bit left, bit right, and diagonals. And then I also did a tiny little bit of dry brushing on his pants, but because of the two colours of the thing, it still looks different. Painted the rocks grey. I had some reference photos I go down to the beach fairly regularly, and I've taken some photos of rocks that have interested me, so I was using the reference photos to get the idea of what colours the rocks should be. So painted the basic grey, got a bit of orange that you can see there, did some dots and then feathered it out. I was doing this wet on wet, so there's a lot of blending of the colours, and after I did the orange I then went and also did some white. Now I thought I was just going to have basic rocks and try and just make them look more oceany, but in the process of doing this, this was stippling with a a brush that broke, so the handle's very short. The bristles are quite stiff. It's a round, I think it's a number 2 or a number 3 brush, and I just stippled it straight on and then blurred it with the bristles going back and forth and a little bit of paper and things to get the impression of the rocks. At this stage I thought I would come back and do more white or a couple more greys, but then I was looking at the photos and I had a photo of barnacles that grow on some of the rocks at the beach where I was, so I decided to do a barnacle thing, and it has turned out really, really well, and I'm glad that I did it. So the barnacle process is getting some gap filler. These are the photos of the rocks when I just painted them and there was nothing else. Then I had the brilliant idea for the barnacles at what would be tide line. At this point in time I still wasn't sure whether I was going to do some resin around his legs. I decided not to because of the way that the model finishes. I didn't really want to have a clear water in the middle of nowhere, and I decided to just go with the sand. But I'm given the impression that there has been some tide, that the rocks go under the tide. So I got some gap filler and stuck it into a very, very small syringe from the back, and then proceeded to just dot with the syringe the gap filler all over the rocks. If I got too big a point, I went back and knocked the point off a little bit. So they were just a whole bunch of little dots around the rocks. I did it all over the small rocks, and I did it a little bit on a couple of the rocks between his legs, but not all of the rocks between his legs, because I decided that some of the rocks would have maybe washed in with the tide and would move around so the barnacles don't stick to them. And then I did it halfway up the big rock to represent the tide mark. After I had done all the little dots, I then got a toothpick, which is what I'm doing now, and I went through and poked a little hole in every single one of the dots, sometimes wiggling it a little bit to extend the hole, and as a result I ended up with things that seriously look like barnacles. I am so thrilled with this, it's almost make me want to go and do some more nautical projects so that I can stick barnacles on everything. The barnacles look like barnacles right up until the point that you touch them, and then they're still spongy like gap filler is, rather than being really hard like barnacles are. But the way that it all came together, I was really, really thrilled with the outcome, and I'm very glad that I went ahead and did that. So again, once I worked with what I was comfortable to work with until I thought it was going off too far. The gap filler that I'm using is the Selleys S20, so it's only 20 minutes before you can paint it, so I didn't want to go too long before I started putting the holes and working in it, just so that it didn't go off too early. So lots and lots of poking little holes in the gap filler, but the result is excellent. And if you feel like barnacling something, that would be the way that I would do it forever after. So there you go, barnacles on the thing, tide line for the beach. Looks the part. The only thing that remained for the barnacles was when it was dry I did a black wash on it, just to really define the fact that bits of it were poking out, and it came up really, really well. I was really glad with the process. Some glamour shots, just some stills, because I wasn't sure how the video was going to turn out. And then after that, the black wash into the recesses and everything that needs to be painted was done. Then I got some sand, put it onto the base, and did the spray glue on it to set it into place. So it's just a combination of PVA glue, water, and a little bit of detergent to get it to flow better. Sorry, I did paint underneath it, but I got in the road of that, which is why it's such a short thing. I painted all of the cream, and then I put the sand on and did a spray wash to get the sand. I did the between his leg, that method for between his feet and everything. Just, this is sand that I had dried. We got a whole bunch of sand, and then I grabbed some of it and left it in the oven for a little bit and then let it dry, and I have it in a box, so anytime I need it, I haven't gone through it yet in the times that I'm doing things. Usually bases don't take that much. So waited until it was dry, and then for the sides I just got PVA glue and straight PVA glue and painted it on, and then dusted the sand on bits at a time. There were a couple of light spots doing it this way, so I did come back after each coat, after they dry, I came back and touched up the bits where you could still see through to the paint underneath. So some of the sand got applied a couple of times to different things to fix up the blobs, but when it all dried, it came good. There's a little bit of variation in the sand because of the thicknesses of the things, and it ended up looking like some of it was wet. So there's the original model with the way that it is when you just buy it straight, and then following is the way that it is when it was all finished and got its barnacles and its sand on. So there it is, that's the build. You got a couple more turntable turns with my funky turntable that's definitely automatic and not my hand or hair that's in the shot there. And then I'm just going to do a bit of a zoom around showing you some of the details close up. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed the process, and I hope it's inspiring you. I would recommend for you to go and have a look at Chris Cosplay's YouTube video from 2 years ago where he did it with the colours when he painted his and made it look really good and inspired this one. But if you want to go the extra hog and change your posture and give him a bit more of a hero pose, which I think this did quite well, by all means get in there and hack into it. I just used a hacksaw for cutting down it. It was interesting in terms of a bit of effort, but not taxing to cut through the resiny stone, whatever it is. Saws really well. Alright, I'm going to shut up from here on in. I'll just say goodbye. Thank you for staying through to the end. I really hope you have enjoyed it. I've certainly enjoyed it. I've got another statue which I'm going to try and turn into a hover tank driver because it's the same sort of armour but a different shaped head. But that is a project for the future, which is not happening in the next couple of weeks because we're all back to work and 6 days a week. Alright, thank you very much. I'll see you next time.